building your first API with Gravity is a fast and simple process, so let's get started. Here we have our branded portal, and you can see this is currently branded for Gravity at the moment. This enables me to go in and discover my APIs and to be able to understand what APIs were available for me to be able to consume as a consumer of the APIs for your given company. So in this case, we want to go and deploy our first API. So as an administrator or as an API owner, I can go in and click on the administration part of the portal here, and that will take me to the administration part of my portal. You can see all of the APIs that I've previously deployed. But let's assume that this is the first time that I'm going to be deploying an API. So I click on this plus symbol down in the bottom right hand corner. Now this gives me three options. I can create an API from scratch using this wizard approach, which is what we will do today. Or I can import from a file or a link using an OpenAPI specification in these two scenarios. So that would enable you to automatically build the API with mocks and all this sort of stuff. But in this case, we're going to build our API from scratch. So let's click on this. So now I'm presented with this wizard, a 5-step wizard to build and deploy my API. And it's a very fast process, as you'll see. So in this case, I'm going to build a time API, and I'll create version 1. And let's give it a description so it makes it better for people to be able to discover the API. So this is a time API. And the context path, I'll give it time. So essentially what this is doing is it's putting the API on a specific path. So it might be api.company.com/time. Now we have to tell it where the service is actually located. So the actual service that we are proxying, we have to tell it where to access that service. So in this case, we have this simple service at api.gravity.io/what time is it. Okay, and that's the service that we will be calling. Very simple service that just gives you a date and a timestamp. Now the plan is the next step. The plan is what enables the contract between the consumer of the API and the API itself. So for example, you might have a silver plan, a gold plan and a platinum plan that enables 2,000, 4,000 and 6,000 calls per day respectively. In this scenario, let's go ahead and create a silver plan, and we're going to use an API key. If I was doing this if I wasn't using the wizard here, then I would be presented the options to use both JWT and OAuth authentication as well. But using the wizard, we just limit it to keyless, so anyone can consume it, and an API key. You can change this in future if you did want to change the authentication mechanism, so this is not set in stone. So let's go ahead here and auto-validate the subscription. So this is enabling me to be able to allow consumers to auto-subscribe to the silver plan. So it might be that the silver plan, anybody can sign up for straight away. The gold plan, maybe they have to request access to it before they can access that particular API, or that plan of the API, I should say. And so that's what this auto-validate enables. So the silver plan enables 2,000 calls per day and 2 calls per second. Okay, so we're going to put limits here. So we're going to say you're allowed 2 requests per 1 second, and you're allowed 2,000 requests per 1 day. Okay, so that's essentially what we've just put here. It gives you this. You can, as well as applying policies to the API through the designer, which we'll see a bit later, you can also do it through this wizard. So let's click next. In this case, I'm not going to apply any documentation to this API, but you could, of course, add your own documentation as people would see necessary. Skip. And then I'm going to create and start the API. So you can see within the matter of a couple of minutes, we built our first API. So let's go ahead and publish the API on the portal. Okay. Now, if we come back here, what I should be able to do is if I come to my catalog now, and I search for my time API, there you go. It's the very first one at the top there. So you can see here that I'm able to subscribe to my time API. So let's go ahead and subscribe to it. So you can see it's got automatic validation like we set up. You can see the silver plan that we're using here, and it's using a key as well, a personal key in this scenario. And you can see it tells me here the silver plan enables 2,000 calls per day and 2 calls per second. So let's click next. Now in this scenario, you have to use an application. So in a separate video, we'll talk to you about what an application is. But essentially, the application is the consuming entity of the API. So as a consumer of the API, I can have multiple applications, and the application is the actual entity that does the consumption. So in this case, let me use my default application here, and I could add a comment to the API owner if I wanted. In this case, I won't. And you can see validate the request, so I can auto-validate the request. And you can see right here that it's straight away, it's enabled me to start consuming my API. So right at the bottom here, it's actually told me what the URL for this API is. So let's go ahead and take that. Now I'm going to use Postman here just to quickly make this call, and I'll put that into the URL. You can see it straight away told me what the URL is. And equally, if I go back here, it tells me that I need to apply a header with my API key. Let's copy this one up here. And let's go back to Postman. And we go to headers. And the key, if you remember, is xgravity API key. And the value is this. So let's go ahead and send my request. So you can see there, in the space of about 4 to 5 minutes, I've designed and I've deployed my API. As later steps, there's much more complex stuff that you can then start doing to do with your API, like designing it, applying all of your different policies. Like if you wanted to add things like JWT, for example, here, I can just drag and drop it. This is one of the key features of Gravity, is the simplicity with which you can apply your policies and really shape your API in a way that you would like to see it used. But for the time being, that shows you the simplicity and the ease with which you can build and deploy your APIs on your own branded portal. I hope that's been helpful. Thanks.